Chances are at some point in your writing, if not on a daily basis, you have worried that you're not a great writer, that in fact, maybe you have nothing unique to add to the story world, that you have so much to learn. But the truth is, those are normal feelings for any writer. And even writers who have had massive success, huge bestsellers, movies made out of their work, these writers also have the same doubts. As Ernest Hemingway famously said, we are all apprentices in a craft where no one ever becomes a master. And even Stephen King, in one of his more recent short story collections, said something along the lines of how no matter how much he's been writing or how long he's been writing, he still feels like a noob, like an amateur. And I think this is true for so many of us, because writing is not a craft where you study for a while and then you get a degree or you have a certain amount of experience and you're done learning. This is the type of career and lifelong pursuit of just getting a little bit better. No one ever becomes the best writer they can possibly be, because there's always ways to improve. So whether you're coming to this video as someone who has not quite finished your first novel or even started your first novel, or you're someone with 100 best-selling novels out there, hopefully you will get something out of these top 7 tips for ways to improve your writing. So let's dive in. Number 1 is to consume a lot of stories. So stories can take many forms. It can be, of course, books, but also movies, television series, manga, even games. So MMOs or storyline games like Skyrim and things like this, where you follow a character through an entire story. Pay attention to the way those stories are told and view them as a writer. Chances are you've been viewing these types of things as a reader or a consumer for a very long time. And that tends to kind of marinate in a way inside your brain, where you get an innate sense and an intuitive sense of how stories are told and what makes good pacing. You can start to watch films and tell when there's about to be a twist or a turn in the story, because it's that time. And the more stories you consume, the more intuitive your storytelling will become. I definitely recommend that you consume as many stories as you can in your own realm or your own chosen genre, so that you can understand what reader expectations are. Even if you plan to break the so-called rules, it's so important to know what those rules are. And let's say you're starting to write urban fantasy, for example. You may not understand what's typical in an urban fantasy if you've never really read any before. And I've heard writers before say to me, I don't want to consume other people's stories in my genre because then I'll do things like them, and I really want to be different. I can understand the thought behind that to a degree. I am a firm believer that you need to thoroughly understand the rules of a genre before you break them, because there are just certain things that readers expect. And even though you can play with them, you need to go into it with your eyes wide open, understanding what reader expectations are so that you can properly lead them to new twists and new ideas. One of the most fun things that I love to do, and I've been doing this for the past probably 12 or 13 years of my writing, is to every once in a while just sit down and make a list of all of my favorite tropes and topics, all of my favorite themes. Like, for some reason, I just am always drawn to stories about twins who've been separated. I'm always drawn to stories about haunted houses and to young adult stories where you have an orphan who is trying to find their way in the world. So just make a master list of the types of characters you've enjoyed most, the tropes that you are often drawn to, and who did it best. What book or movie did you watch or consume that this was like the pinnacle of how a friends to lovers romance should be? And keep a book or a notebook of all of these stories that you consume. Then when you get to a point later when you need a little bit of inspiration, you can turn to this notebook and to these master lists of other stories, and you can get tons of inspiration from those ideas. The more you consume story, the more you will begin to intuitively understand how stories are told. Number 2, of course, study the craft. This is another one where I've had a lot of friends in the past who have said, I don't read craft books because I don't want to know the rules of how to do Act 1, Act 2. I don't want to have to plot. For a lot of those people, they feel like knowing story structure and how stories are often put together is going to hold them back or make them feel too constrained in their plots. But the truth is, the more you get to know about how stories have been put together for centuries, if not longer, the more freedom you get, because you can work within those boundaries and things become a lot more solid in your storytelling. The pacing gets better. The understanding of where things twist and turn gets better. So understanding craft is so important, and not just the craft of how to tell a story, but how to get better with dialogue, how to go deeper with your POVs and how characters are thinking in their head, how to get stronger emotion on the page, how to eliminate more passive voice. I could list a dozen topics, if not more, of things that we could always improve on. And I think that if you deny studying the craft and you just say, I'm just going to rely on my own intuition, sometimes you're missing out on becoming a much stronger writer. And again, I know that everybody has their own process, but I honestly, truly believe that the more you learn about how things have been done and working for centuries and how other authors have done certain things like handling dialogue, handling description and setting, and you understand all the different ways around it and the way sentences are put together and all of that stuff, that you will actually become a better writer over time. Tip number 3 is to improve your own process. So like I was saying, every author has their own process. And for some of us, that includes plotting everything out, having your note cards and getting things ready to go before so that you can just sit down and write the story. For some of us, like me, I have to have the plot all in place, but I also allow the story to change as I'm writing because I become a more intuitive writer. But I gotta know what's happening in the story before I start. So in that way, I'm kind of what I think a lot of people are, sort of a hybrid, that I love to plot and have the story out in front of me, but then I have to also allow some freedom once I get writing. For other authors, there is no plot at all. There's just maybe an idea of scenes and you get started writing. And in that case, that's great. But what's your process for how do you handle edits when you get started? What's your process for getting that to someone that might give you feedback? And the more you begin to understand and improve your own process, the better off you are going to be and the more efficient of a writer you're going to be. This also includes things like understanding when the best time of day is for you to write, understanding if you're someone who likes to jump right into the next novel, or if you need, like me, a couple of weeks off of downtime and consuming other stories before you jump right in. And the reason this is so important to understand about yourself is that often when we watch other authors doing things, we think we need to do what they're doing. So in my example, I have a lot of friends that write 7 or 8 books a year, which for me is just at this point in my life impossible. And so I would look and see what they're doing and think, oh my gosh, they would post in a Facebook group and the day after their book is done, they're already starting the next book. And so that made me doubt my own process and myself. And so I started thinking, okay, as soon as this book is done, I better jump on the next book. And what ended up happening is because I wasn't honoring my own personal process and instead was comparing myself to other people, I ended up wasting time because I was in a state of burnout where I really needed a break. And instead of taking the break, I tried to push myself and pushed myself deeper and deeper into burnout. So now when I finish a book, I might take some time to make up the pretty note cards or do some fun things with my planner or kind of rereading back through my old books that are in this series, but I don't jump straight into writing the day after. So I am not a writer who can write every day. Once a book is finished, I need to set aside some time to just chill out, consume, play games, have some fun. And then in a couple of weeks, when I start to feel that creativity come back, I am ready to dive back in. And I no longer allow myself to feel guilt over not jumping into a new book the next day. And that's just one example of how knowing your own personal process and paying attention to how you feel throughout the writing process can help improve you as a writer. Because once you come to the table or to the keyboard with your best self, you will also have your best words and your best writing sessions. Tip number 4 comes kind of back to that idea of a master list, and that is to write what you love. So just about nothing can kill your creativity and your true joy and mastery of a book than writing something that you don't really care about. But in this day and age where you can get your books to market pretty much overnight and you feel like you're competing with all these other people who are making money and trying to make a voice for yourself, it is very easy to get drawn into this idea of this is what sells, therefore this is what I need to write. And in fact, there are lots of teachers out there and indie authors who will tell you that exact thing. Write what sells. This is really tough advice. If you write something just because you think it's going to sell, but you're not really invested in writing it because you don't read it, you don't enjoy it, it's not your favorite thing, you're not passionate, you don't want to sit down to it every day, it's just like a job making widgets on a factory floor, you're probably not going to find the same level of success as the other authors in that genre that you were looking up to. Like, wow, look at how well they're selling. And you think you're going to sell that well. But those authors are probably pouring their heart into that genre because they love it. So if you don't love a genre, don't write it. And that I know is controversial advice, but it comes truly from the heart. And that is a big part of what this whole channel is about. Heart breathings comes from one of my most favorite quotes, fill your paper with the breathings of your heart. Don't fill your paper with the breathings of what you think will sell best. If you can find the place where you can find the most marketable thing that you also love to write, that is your sweet spot. But don't sacrifice your own passion and the things that light you up, thinking that it's going to give you a career in writing. Because even if it does, because you hit a big trend or you happen to get lucky, give you a short-term career or a little bit of money, it's not going to be sustainable for you because your heart's not in it. And at that point, it's going to be so much harder to start completely over with a genre you actually wanted to be writing. So just skip that whole parade and write what you love. And of course, like I said, try to find that place where you're writing something that you love that is also marketable, or in a way, you're going to present it in a way that's marketable. We're talking about this a lot now that my Publish and Thrive course has started, but make sure that you're being true to yourself. Because if you truly want a long-term career where you are becoming the best writer you possibly can be, you have to be writing something you're interested in and you're passionate about. How are you ever going to improve as an author if you're writing stuff that you're not really into just because you think you're going to make money? There are lots of jobs out there you could do to make money. Write what lights you up. And that goes back to that list that I was talking about in point number 1. Make that master list of the types of things that really get you excited and make you want to read other stories, and then write that. And I promise you, there is some kind of special magic that will go into that book because you poured your heart and your experience and your love into it. And that will make you a better writer. Tip number 5 is to get feedback from other authors and from editors. So there are lots of ways to get feedback. And I know when you're just starting out, it can feel like, who can I trust to send my book to? How do I know if they're giving me good advice? And the truth is, you can sometimes get mixed up with critique partners or beta readers who really are not your people. But if you can find a critique group or a set of friends that are willing to exchange chapters with you back and forth and give you true feedback on what you're doing, you will learn so very much. This is how I got started, and it improved my writing instantly. Back in the day when I was first getting started, I met some friends at a Christmas party for RWA, and we started meeting every single week to exchange papers. One of those critique partners was incredible, and she helped me and she made me a much better writer. Even though she didn't write YA, she was able to really draw out better description, better dialogue, and teach me a lot about writing. The other critique partner, however, was plain mean, and she would mark things in red and say, this is the dumbest thing I've ever read, things like that. So when you're thinking about getting feedback from someone, pay attention to the way that their comments make you feel and whether they're actually trying to improve your writing or whether they're just criticizing your writing. And if you guys want to see a video on what makes a good critique partner and how to tell if someone's advice is something you should take, please comment down below and let me know that you'd like to see a video on that, because I do have experience with a lot of different critique partners. So I actually left that initial group, even though I had gotten some really good feedback from one person, and joined another group from writers that I met during NaNoWriMo. And this critique group became a group that I met with every single week. I know you can't necessarily meet in people's houses right now in 2021, but you could still meet on Zoom calls or exchange comments through Google Drive or something like that. But It's so very valuable to have critique partners, and you can find them in all kinds of places, other writing groups, like in my Heart Breathings Word Sprint group. If you join chapters like RWA and different things like that, like writing groups, you can even find help in your local NaNoWriMo group, your regional group. There's always other writers who are looking for help with critique and with exchanging. And sometimes that does mean having to develop relationships with people before you reach out, because there is a time investment there. But again, I can do more videos on how to get critique partners and how to tell if their advice is good in a future video. But I think it is so important, even if you can't find a critique partner, start working with an editor as soon as your book is done and you're ready to share it with people, or just someone there in your household that you know supports you and loves you, because someone else's eyes on your book and your work can help improve it drastically, because they will be able to see your strengths and weaknesses in ways that you can't. Which brings me to tip number 6. Figure out your strengths and your weaknesses. Of course, it's hard to do this by yourself, but I do think that even as you're writing, you begin to understand what things come really easily to you and what things are like pulling teeth. So your strength might be that dialogue just flows out of you. It's very natural. You can hear it in your head. You can write that down really quickly. But maybe description, when it comes to setting and ambiance and describing how characters move across the page, maybe that is a lot harder for you. Or it could be that characters come to you almost fully formed and you're really great at character. But when it comes to story arc and twists and turns, you kind of get muddled as to where things are supposed to go and making decisions about what those characters do next. So start paying attention as you're writing to what comes easily and what is really tough for you. Then, going back to my previous tip about studying the craft, make a list of what your weaknesses are and study brilliant writers who have come before you that have great advice on how to improve. That can come through YouTube videos that you're watching. There are tons of books out there that are all about specific subjects, like how to improve your dialogue, how to get better at story structure, how to get better at setting or telling a mystery. There is pretty much a book out there on writing craft for almost every single thing you could potentially have as a weakness. But it's just as important to know your strengths, especially once you get started publishing. You'll start to hear that feedback from your writers of, oh my gosh, she's the cliffhanger queen. I love her cliffhangers. Oh my gosh, she tells such great twists. Or something I hear a lot from my readers is, I get sucked in like I'm seeing it in a movie. So I know that even though I'm not a super descriptive writer, like I don't really set a scene and describe every single thing on the page, but I know that I have an immediate way of writing that pulls people in and makes them feel like they're part of the action. Once you know what your strengths are, you can play those up in the fiction that you're writing and make those the strongest focal point of your work, and really let it be known in your blurbs and in your marketing that this is what I'm known for. And if you come to me and you read my book, I guarantee you're going to get this. And in fact, this is another thing I could talk about more. Once you know those strengths, it makes it a lot easier to write across different genres, because you understand why readers are coming to you, and you still bring those strengths across to your genre, whether you're writing young adult fantasy or new adult contemporary romance. And of course, tip number 7 is not only to continue writing and write as much as possible, but to write and actually finish things. And I know for some of you, you're going to be like, oh crap, this is not the advice I wanted to hear. But you will learn more from finishing a novel and actually seeing it through to the end than you would from starting 100 different novels that you never made it past the midpoint. I promise you. I spent really and truly a couple of years as an early writer starting things and not completely finishing them and feeling like, no, this isn't really good enough. This isn't the best story for me. I'm going to start something new. And I would start a new story. I would ride that momentum. I would hit a point where it got hard, and I would kind of think, oh, I'm doubting myself. I suck as a writer. I'm not going to be able to finish this. And I would move on to something new and exciting. But once I actually finished a book that I really loved and it was fully done and I was proud of it, I learned more in the process of finishing it and going back to edit than I had in all the other manuscripts and 2 full years of writing before that. So finish it. Even if that doubt person, that sabotage. Evil sweetie is what my husband calls her in my life. Even if evil sweetie is in your head saying, this sucks, there's nothing unique about it, it's boring, you need, oh, look at this new shiny plot bunny over here, shiny new story. Don't listen to evil sweetie or whatever your evil side person is. Instead, listen to that part of you that says, I am going to finish this and I'm going to see it through. And even if you end up scrapping that novel and no one ever sees it and you start something new after that, just the process of writing through to the very end of a novel and understanding how the editing works and how a story gets put together is going to teach you so much, and it will improve your writing exponentially. Okay guys, so those are my top 7 tips. I could go so much deeper into every single one of these. So if there's more you would like to hear about, please let me know in the comments. As always, if you enjoyed this advice, don't forget to subscribe, hit that like button, and make a comment down below letting me know what you want to see more of. I do have a new video series in the works that will come with a free workbook for you to download that is all about great ideas. So what do you do if you feel your idea isn't unique enough? What makes something a high concept idea? And then finally, how to go from idea to actual book. So that's going to be a really fun series. I hope that you'll subscribe to get notifications on that. I do have some videos on Notion as well and how I'm using that in my writing, but it's probably going to be a few more weeks before I get to that. So definitely make sure you're subscribed with that bell on for notifications as soon as new videos go up from me. And I will see you guys in my next one. Bye.